this is the second most historically significant site in the state of Minnesota after Fort Snelling. To stabilize this building is going to be over $2 million. That's the main argument, is the cost of what's going to be involved with this. The main support of it is this is unique. Once it's gone, it's going to be gone forever. And we're going to have generations, maybe 2 generations or 5 generations, that are going to say, why didn't they save this? I'm so interested in this history, and it's gone because they didn't have the foresight to keep the buildings for us. My name is Jim Checkle. When Minnesota became a state, they did not have public education. And one of the things that the local churches and groups did was they started establishing, if you look in Winona, several of the places there were established by the Catholic Church. This was established by the Baptist Church. They came into this area of Wasioja, which at the time was about, the 4th or 5th largest city in the state of Minnesota. And they came in and there was no education going on here. And so the leaders of the Free Will Baptist Church said, we need to develop a seminary where we can teach male students, because they did not educate female students at that time. And so for roughly a year or so, they had these students and they were teaching Greek and Latin and math and English and dozens and dozens of subjects. And so in 1861, our governor happened to be out in Washington, D.C. when the Civil War was declared. And he went to the Secretary of War and he said, I will promise you 1,000 troops from Minnesota. Minnesota at that time was the youngest state and the first state to pledge troops. So he pledged 1,000 troops. Word got back to Minnesota, and the lawyer here in Wasioja was a friend of the Secretary of War and the governor. And so James George came down, walked a few blocks over here, came in and spent about 3 hours giving a really passionate speech about why the students had to come down to go fight. 6 months, you'll be back. We're going to go down. We're going to win this war. You'll be back in 6 months, and every one of you will return. No problem. And of the 80 original ones who signed up, 25 came back. The rest were either decided not to come back or were killed or whatever in the Civil War. When you look at the actual size of the structure, you don't really consider it to be that big a structure usually, but there were 300 students in here at its peak, and it was also one of the biggest educational buildings in the state of Minnesota when it was finished. My understanding was they had the younger kids on the upper floor and the older kids on the main floor. You had your quarries, you had businesses, you had 500 people living in town, you had hotels, you had people coming from out east to come out to the frontier, the big shining city on the frontier. And Wasioja at one time was considered, had the potential of being the county seat, and it was also going to be the town that everybody wanted to come to. So the railroad bypassed, you lost most of your students in the Civil War. The quarries then closed because they basically ran out of the rock that they were using. And then you had a lot of the small towns such as Casson and Dodge Center, the public moved over to those locations, and Wasioja went from basically, one of the major towns on the frontier to a few hundred people. And so when people left, they left the buildings. There's 3 different groups tried to keep the school going, but what ended up happening was they didn't have enough students. The state of Minnesota started free public education. There was all these other things, and so the school just gradually folded and closed in 1896. In 1905, there was a major fire inside the building, supposedly started by some boys that were goofing around in there one night. But anyway, the building burned, and what we have now is the ruins of the seminary. just as a silent memorial to those that had served and had been part of this community. I just think it's so important for us to remember what got us to here is what's going to have to get us to the next point. And so if we're taking a look at, what people in the past have faced, we can face pretty much anything.
Funding for this program is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.